welcome to Reality Church's online gathering. We're so glad that you could join us this morning. Just thank you for making our service a part of your Sabbath. If you've joined us before, then you might be familiar with our pattern of beginning with responsive reading and a time of prayer together, followed by teaching, and then we respond through musical worship. Because today is the first Sunday of Advent, we are going to move from our usual responsive reading coming from the Anabaptist prayer book into a time of celebrating Advent through lighting the Advent candles. This might be a tradition that you're familiar with, and maybe you practice it in your home. We would encourage you, since we're all in our homes and not together for the lighting of the candles, that we would encourage you to consider setting up your own Advent candles in your home so that you can take part in this remembrance together with us in your homes as we light the candles here at the church. I'm just going to begin by talking about Advent, coming from the Anabaptist prayer book that we've been using. Advent simply means coming. It is the season of yearning and hoping. Its cry is, "Come, Lord Jesus." The last of the seasons of the church to develop, Advent began as a period of preparation before Christmas, just as Lent is preparation for Easter. From the beginning, it has been a time of both repentance and hope, a time we enter in a spirit both of self-examination and of anticipation. So I invite you to join me. As usual, I'll read the parts in white, and you can join me by reading the parts in yellow at home. One of the earliest recorded prayers of the church is the Aramaic word Maranatha, which literally means, "Come, Lord Jesus." The Latin word Adventus means the same thing, come. Advent is a season of waiting and wanting, looking and longing, inviting Christ to come once more into our lives and into our world. We pause now and repeat this ancient prayer. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. Our first Advent candle represents hope. The prophet Isaiah wrote these words 600 years before the birth of Jesus. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. A light has dawned, but all around us we see so much darkness. Today we begin this Advent season by lighting a candle of hope and letting it burn in us despite the darkness. Let's pray. God of hope, it is difficult to imagine a world other than that which surrounds us. At times it feels like hope is to be dismissive of the sorrow and injustice that seeps into every sphere of society. Would you make us people whose roots are entwined with hope itself, that we would at all times be grounded in what awaits us as we face the harsh winds of present evil? Grant us hope that is deeply connected to lament and solidarity, a hope that isn't naive or neglectful of the present, but makes us crave renewal of the now with greater depth. Amen.
Well, hello, Reality family. Thank you so much for joining us today. Whenever you're watching this or listening to it, we're just so grateful that you're choosing to spend some time with us. And my prayer in preparation has been that even though we're not able to be present with one another physically, that God would be just tangibly present with you and even creating us to be more and more His family through the power of His Holy Spirit in this time. So thanks for joining us. As Sarah mentioned, it is the Advent season, and so it's both crazy to think that Christmas is 4 weeks away, and at the same time, I think many of us are giddy, not just for Christmas, but just for 2020 to be over. So we're excited to get out of this year. Usually in this time, we preach on Advent, but we're going to take 2 more weeks in our Rule of Life series. So we have a teaching this week, and then next week we'll do our last one. Then we will have 3 times where we celebrate and prepare ourselves for before Christmas with Advent. So we'll have 2 weekends, and then we will have a Christmas Eve service. And those will all be dependent on whatever the restrictions are, whether they're in person and online or just online. Then after Christmas, we'll take a week off. So we'll just take some time to rest and renew. And then we'll come back in January. We'll finish off our Rule of Life series. I think we have 3 more in January. And then we'll transition into a time where we look at the life of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark through the theme of King and Kingdom. So I hope you'll plan to join us in that time. Rule of Life, as a reminder, is just ancient language for the practices and habits that help us to grow in the way of Jesus, to become more like him. And so if you're new, I encourage you to go back and listen to the first 2 teachings that we did on this. It'll help give some context to why we're doing it and what it looks like. And since that time, we've just been preaching through different practices. So we preach through it, we teach through it, and then we practice them together as a community and as individuals throughout the week. Last week, we talked about friendship and specifically spiritual friendship. And so I want to go back there to set up what we're talking about today. We looked at this book, The 4 Loves by C.S. Lewis. And he says that love in English in the Bible has actually got 4 different Greek words behind it. And so he talks about agape love. This is the love that God pours out to us through Jesus. We were made for this kind of love. He gives it and we receive it. And when we do, we are drawn into God's family. And in that family, after receiving the agape love of Jesus, we give out the different kind of love to our family, the family of God, which is he calls storge love or affection. And this is kind of like familial type of love. And we looked at Acts 2 as an example of how we serve and love and give to one another out of the love we receive from God. There's also eros love, romantic love. We very briefly talked about that. And then finally, we spent the majority of our time talking about filio love or philia love, which is translated friendship. That this is what God has made us for. We're not only made to be friends with people, to have human companionship, but that as followers of God and just any human being, people created in the image of God, we are also made for divine friendship. And I introduced this idea of spiritual friendship, which is that in spiritual friendship, we have both divine friendship and human friendship, that there are always 3, never just 2. And so I want to pick up where a different author talks about this filial love, and that's the Apostle Paul in Romans 12. So if you're at home, I encourage you to just pause this and grab a Bible, come back. If not, you can just listen to me read it or follow along on the screen. So Paul writes in Romans 12, "Love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. Take the lead in honoring one another. Do not lack diligence and zeal. Be fervent in the Spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in affliction, be persistent in prayer. Share with the saints in their needs." And so this beautiful picture of what love looks like between brother and sister, that we are sharing everything with each other, that we're praying for one another. This picture that kind of mimics what we talked about last week in Acts 2. And then we read these 2 words at the very end of verse 13. Philioxenia, diokantes. Philioxenia, diokantes. And so I want to talk about these 2 Greek words because they set up what our practices for this week. So the first word is philoxenian, and we've already seen this part of the word right here, philo, last week. It's the same word that's translated friendship. But this word xenian or xeno is a new word to us. So the friendship that we talked about last week is like friendship between 2 people that have something common, that like each other, that are drawn to each other. Xeno is the opposite. It's people who are foreign to us, who are different than us, that we, rather than magnetize to them, we might be repelled by them. And we might have heard of the word xenophobia. Phobia means fear. So xenophobia is a fear of other people, the fear of those who are different than us, maybe ethnically or culturally. And when Jesus comes, he recognizes this is part of the normal human experience, that we would have a fear of the other, a fear of things that are different. But he says, when we receive the love of God, when we experience this agape love, that it actually transforms us, and love overcomes our fears. And we're able not to just rely on the fear, the natural fear we might have of other people, but that we're transformed into people that can learn how to love our neighbor, love people who are different than us. And so Jesus talks about this in the Good Samaritan and many other places. And the Greek word philoxenian is often translated in the New Testament as the word hospitality. So this word is used several other times. Let's take a quick look. 1 Peter 4, in this passage, Peter is writing to a church that's in exile, which is something we talked about in our Vision series. The CSB, the title of this section is called End Time Ethics. How do we live in between the time that Jesus has come and when we await his return? And he says one of the key things we need to do is be hospitable to one another without complaining. The same idea of philoxenian. Hebrews 13 puts it this way: let brotherly love, the word here is Philadelphia, continue. Don't neglect showing hospitality. So the same mirroring of Romans, to show brotherly love to one another, and don't neglect hospitality. And then he says, for by doing this, some have welcomed angels as guests without knowing it. A very mysterious and interesting saying we won't get into today. In the New Testament, there's also only a few passages that talk about qualifications for leaders. What should you be looking for in people who are, overseers, deacons, elders? And the list is interesting, and it talks about people being having many of the characteristics we may think of, being above reproach, not arrogant, not hot-tempered. But two of the lists, at least these two, also include that the person must be hospitable. That's an important characteristic for a leader to have. In her study on hospitality in the early church, Amy Oden writes this: the astounding range and depth of evidence tell us that hospitality as a practice and as a virtue held a central place in the early Christian life. Indeed, there's hardly a place where we can look where we will not see traces of it. And so that's hospitality, this word, philoxenia. The second word, so we see hospitality here, the second word, diakontes, is different, and it's often translated as practicing. And of course, that goes with what we're talking about right now in this Rule of Life series, that we need to be practicing these things. And so Paul is calling the Roman church to practice hospitality. But I think the word is actually stronger than just practice. And let's look at it quickly, look at the next verse. So Paul says, share with the saints in their needs, diakontes, hospitality, practice hospitality. But the next verse says, bless those who diakontes you. And this word is often translated as persecute you or hound you, some translations say. And so it's a stronger word than just practice, even though it does mean practice. It means like, a hot pursuit of something. We looked at Philippians this summer, and Paul says this in Philippians. He says, I diakontes as my goal. I pursue, I passionately run after as my goal the prize promised by God's heavenly call in Christ Jesus. And here we see this beautiful matching of grace and effort that we're not earning, that Paul has been promised, has received God's heavenly call in Christ Jesus. Jesus has done it, but Paul is putting effort in. He is pursuing. He is running after and hounding after the calling of God on his life. And so we see this word diakontes to mean that, and it's in the present tense in Romans. That means that we're supposed to be doing it now. We need to be practicing now hospitality. And so if I was to translate this, put it together and translate it for our church family today, I would say practice hospitality. These two Greek words mean that we need to make space through planning to open our lives for others in order for them to experience the love of God. So say that again, make space through planning to open our lives for others to experience the welcoming love of God. Let's take a look at a couple of those, this whole sentence. The first is that we're to make space. In our series so far, we have been very clear that in order, the disciplines are not just something more that you are called to do, but rather that we have to learn how to resist. We need to learn how to stop doing certain things in order that we can embrace, that we can start new things. And so when it comes to hospitality, it's the same as true, that we need to resist the choice of filling our time, our calendar, our spaces with things that are focused only on us and our wants and our entertainment in order to make room for hospitality. So we need to make space. The second is that we do these things through planning. As I was reading, so many of the practical books that talk about Christian hospitality talk about the importance of planning. And I was thinking about this, how true this is in my own life. I think of myself as a hospitable person. If you showed up at my door, I'd probably talk to you for quite a while, and I'd invite you in, maybe, for a bit of time, but it'd be like, yeah, come on in. I haven't brushed my teeth, and we have nothing to feed or give you to drink, but come on in. And so I realized through the gift of my wife, who has really likes to plan and like to have these things laid out, and she's just a wonderful host of people, that the experience of hospitality for other people and even for ourselves goes so much better when we do a little bit of planning. In her great book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key, Rosaria Butterfield says, hospitality requires 50% prayer, it is a spiritual thing, 40% organization, you need planning, and 10% chutzpah. What a great quote. So through planning, that we open our lives, and this means opening up our schedules. It means opening up our homes when we're able. It means opening up our kitchens, inviting people to give of their culinary gifts. It means opening up our furniture and sometimes the cleanliness of our home to others. It means opening up our wallets so that we can provide food for other people. So we open up our lives, and the whole point, the goal, is that other people can experience the welcoming love of God. That we learn to express this filial love of God. When we've received the agape love, we're in the family of God, that we can extend this love of God to the world. So our practices this week are designed to help us to practice hospitality, this radical, other-centered love that God has called us to do. And the first one is to have one meal with other people every day. Now, why meals? Well, in his great book, A Meal with Jesus, Tim Chester asked this question. He said, how would you finish this sentence? The Son of Man came, ... I'll give you a second to think about it. He said many of us would answer by saying the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. Or the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom for many. Both things that it says in the gospel and are true. And Chester calls those God's mission. That's what he came to do. But in Matthew 11:19, it also says this, that Jesus came eating and drinking. And Chester says this was his method. He came to seek and save the lost, but his method of gathering disciples, of teaching them his way, of being with them, was to eat and drink. This is the way that he passed on who he was and showed the world. And we can take this idea of eating and drinking with being with Jesus around a table. We can take this theme throughout the Bible, and I'll just chart quickly a few ways that we can do this. If we look at the beginning story, the garden begins as something like a table, an opportunity for us to come together with God. It's both a garden, it's a temple, and it's a table. It's a place where we are able to have the three most important relationships in our world in perfect harmony. Justin Earley says the table and the garden are the center of gravity, where we learn dependence on God, that relationship we were made for, dependence on each other, interdependence, and then also dependence on creation. And interestingly enough, the way that people get out of the garden, or Adam and Eve are kicked out, is because they literally eat their way out. They reject the table of God and choose their own path. Psalm 23 has this beautiful picture of God putting a table out in the midst of the enemies, amidst the chaos of the world, that God offers us nourishment. Jesus has many of the most poignant and scandalous moments in his ministry happen at a table. In Luke 7, Jesus is hosted by these very important people, and this person who we think is a sex worker comes in and has this very intimate moment with Jesus where she rubs his feet with her hair. And everyone in the room is scandalized, and Jesus takes this important moment that happens at a table to teach people about what it means to have your sins forgiven and to love the other. Food was a very contentious issue in the early church. It's written about often in the letters. For example, Paul writes to Peter, and he says that Peter has actually forgot the gospel because he's choosing not to eat with the Gentiles. And of course, the story ends, or doesn't end, but in Revelation, there's this beautiful picture of a feast that we have with Jesus. That we are, I don't know exactly what this will look like, but when he returns, that we'll be able to sit with him, sit beside him and with one another, and be nourished and be fed as we prepare to work together for the healing of the world. And so this theme is traced throughout the entire Bible. And the table is not only important in the Bible, but it's important, I think, in our world, because one of the biggest problems we have, I'd say, in our city, but also around the world, is that people struggle with loneliness. According to Angus Reid, pre-pandemic, 1 in 3 Canadians struggled with loneliness, but since that time, the number has almost doubled to over half of people struggling with extreme loneliness. And this is not only a problem in our city or in our country, it's a problem all over the world. After over 9 million people in the UK said that they had struggled with loneliness, Theresa May appointed a minister of loneliness in the UK. And it's not who you think. It's not this guy. She actually appointed Tracy Couch. What a tough job she has to figure out how to make people not lonely. Some experts say that being lonely for a prolonged period of time is worse than 15 cigarettes a day. Smoking 15 cigarettes, not 16. I don't know. That's way worse. 15 somehow. That loneliness is worse than 15. In the Rexdale Community Health Center in Toronto, they've started combating. They've seen so many people come in with loneliness that they start writing prescriptions for socialization for people. So they'll have people come in and they'll say, what you need to do is you need to go to a museum to be with other people. You need to join this Tai Chi class. You need to go with this other person, make a friend, and go for coffee together. And the table is one of God's prescriptions for loneliness in our world. The word companion, this spiritual friendship that we have, it's a Latin word, or it comes from two Latin words, come, which means together, and panis, which means bread. That we come together, that we find companions around a table. The table in the Bible and in our world is not just a fueling station. It's not just a decoration in our homes, but it's a sacred space. It's a space for worship and for community and mission. And just like we talked about with spiritual friendship, at a spiritual table, there are never two, there are always three. That God is present with us there, and He's present with our community around it. And all we have to do is just open our eyes to that reality. Now, like I said, we are talking about eating one meal with others every day to stem off the loneliness, to practice this companionship. And it's probably the worst time to be preaching of this. I don't want to say ever, but I'm going to say ever. And of course, the restrictions that we have currently forbid us from doing this. And so I want to be very clear, I'm not asking you to break these restrictions. Please abide by the restrictions. And if they change by the time this video goes out, abide by whatever restrictions are out there. But let's find creative solutions and also take this time to plan for when our lives can be places of hospitality again, when we can have meals with others. And so, again, this is a practical series. So how do we practice hospitality by eating with others? Here's just two very practical things for you. First is eat with those you live with. I think no matter what the restrictions are, that you can do this. I shouldn't say no matter what. I could see maybe there's going to be some restrictions that make us all go to our own rooms like we were bad boys. I don't really know. But currently we can eat with our roommates. And so just make that a plan. Make a time to eat with them. If you're a part of a family in a household, eat with your kids. I found this to be, one of the most important times as my kids get older is these dinner times that we have together. Barbara Kingsolver says this: dinner time is the cornerstone of our family's mental health. I'd say 75% of the crucial parenting effort has taken place during or surrounding the time our family convenes for an evening meal. And I found that to be more and more true in my own family as well. Secondly, you could just do lunch. Conrad Gempf, in his book, Mealtime Habits of the Messiah, says this: doing lunch for Jesus was doing theology. And so there's a place that we can, even in our lunch breaks, that we can invite God to be with us, to create that spiritual table. And so we can even do this online. Again, if you're working from home, working online, maybe with your coworkers, just organize a coworker lunch. And I would encourage 2 rules: no work talk, no COVID talk. Just get to know one another, eat together. Have a roommate lunch. Again, if you're with people in your home, take some time. If you're remembering, do your noonday prayer practice, go make your lunch, and then sit down with your roommates and just chat with them and have some companionship over a meal. The third is that you could just have a standing lunch with a friend. Just have some friends maybe that you haven't had a chance to connect with in a long time, and just create a space where you can connect with them. Call them, maybe take a walk and talk to them on the phone, or do a Zoom call, whatever you want with them, in order to create that space that we can eat lunch together. And if you're super, super desperate, you could always call me, and I'd love to make space to have lunch with you and just connect and hear what's going on in your life. So that's some very practical ways that we can practice hospitality by eating with each other, even in these restrictions. So be creative, stay within the restrictions of whatever our government puts down, and just figure it out. Practice hospitality, pursue it. Remember this dogged pursuit of hospitality out of love for God. Our second practice is one act of hospitality with a neighbor every month. So 1 moment of missional engagement with our neighbor every month. And this is practicing hospitality in a different way, because hospitality is not only for our friends and our family, those people that we find companionship and we like, but it's also for those that God puts around us, those who are different than us and share a different faith than us. And this means opening up our schedules, our lives, our family, and our homes to our neighbors. And again, we're not going to spend time going through this, but this is all over the life of Jesus. I think of the Zacchaeus, where he tells Zacchaeus, hey, I'm coming over to your house. He's like, you're going to practice hospitality whether you like it or not, Zacchaeus. But he reaches out to him. Jesus is continually doing that. He's providing spaces of hospitality for people as they come to him. If you've ever been on a mission trip, some of the most beautiful times in mission trips happen around a table, as people with different faith come together, experience different cultures. And I found that this is where friendships are often formed. And it's important practice in exile, as we've seen in the early church, that the table was a very unique place that the church could invite outsiders in. It's a place of mission. And so some of you are really gifted evangelists. We're going to have an interview panel after this talking about hospitality. And Steve Chen was one of the people. He couldn't make it to be part of this panel, but he's one of the most gifted evangelists I've met. I knew him when he was a student at SFU, and we had set up times to meet together. And Steve was rarely on time. He was never on time. And but he would always, or often he would come with these amazing stories of how God was using him in evangelism, or had just had an amazing conversation with somebody. I remember one time he showed up and he was working at Best Buy, and he's like, yeah, I just led my coworker to faith in the Apple aisle at Best Buy. And he just is amazingly gifted by God to create these spaces of hospitality, almost instantaneous, with people where they would just open up to him and he could share Christ's love with them. And it's amazing to watch that gift in action. But the rest of us, and I'm sure there's others of you who are gifted in that way, but many of us aren't. And so for those of us who are not gifted in this way, I want to give us 4 tips to hospitality with our neighbors, things I've learned over the year as a person who's probably not gifted in this area. The first is just to be available. Practice having margin in your life. I was reminded of this recently. I was walking back from a meeting, and I randomly ran into someone on the seawall who used to be part of our community group. And I just started talking to her, and we ended up talking for like 20, 30 minutes. It was just great to catch up, great to have some friendship built there. And I realized if I hadn't had a bit of flex time in my schedule, then I wouldn't have been able to stand there and just enjoy this person and their conversation that we had. And in his book, The Relentless Elimination of Hurry, Pastor John Mark Comer says that this is the number one thing that stops us from having a robust spiritual life, is that our lives are too hurried. And so he encourages each of us to unhurry our lives. And I might say it this way: just have a bit of margin in your life that you can linger, that you can be around. After you drop your kids off for school, that you can talk to some other parents. After you're done work, that you're not necessarily rushing off, but you can stay and chat with your coworkers once in a while. Be available, build a bit of margin, missional margin in your life. The second is to invite others. And I think this is what many of us think of when we think of hospitality, is that we do this. And I think it's true that we need to invite people, invite them to our table, take the initiative with them, invite them to things we're doing in our lives. It doesn't have to be anything special. You're going to the grocery store, invite your neighbor to the grocery store. You're going, you like exercise, hockey, going for a walk, going for a run. Again, whatever the restrictions are, invite your neighbor to come along with you. Join in something that's already happening. Just invite people to join things with you together. Like I said last week, just be interested in people and 15% more friendly than you already are. If you're like me, turn it up to like 30, and then maybe you might find a friend. But just be a little bit more interested in people and a little bit more friendly, and send out invitations. But this next one I think is just as important, which is to see and accept invitations from other people. I'll just illustrate this one with a story. About 10 years ago, we moved into Gastown, and it was one of those things that we had been praying about and wanting to do for a long time. We felt called by God to move down there, and so we were so excited to move into Gastown. And I was kind of like this missionary zeal that I was gonna help reach people in downtown Vancouver. And so shortly after we moved in, I met one of our neighbors. He was named John. Great name. I was like, we're off to a really, really good start here. He had a kid very similar age to our kids at the time. And so we got along pretty well. And so after one or two times chatting with this guy, I said, "Hey man, you like want to, go for a beer?" And he was like, maybe, no, I don't know. And it was kind of a really awkward conversation, which I'm used to. I have lots of these awkward conversations, but it was one of those ones where I sensed some, not yet moments. So whatever, the next time I saw him or a couple times later, I said, "Hey, would you and your wife and your daughter want to come over for dinner?" And again, it was kind of the same reaction. I don't think so. I'm not comfortable doing it. And he kind of shined me off. At this time, I was reading about Jesus as he sent his disciples. And so he would, send his disciples to all over the world, and he sends us all over the world. But in one part of the Gospels, he sends the 72, and he tells them specifically, don't take anything with you. Rely on the hospitality of other people. Be sent in my name and rely on the hospitality of others. And so I thought maybe what I'm doing is I'm just being amazingly too friendly, taking too much initiative with this person. And I need to rely on the hospitality and believe that the Holy Spirit's at work there. So the next time I saw this guy, I had just moved a dishwasher into our place and was getting ready to set it up. So I'm not the greatest electrician, but I know how to do to put a dishwasher to wire it up and get it going. So I saw this guy in the hallway and I said to him, we were just talking, and I said, "Hey, do you have a dishwasher in your place?" He said, "Yeah, I do." And I said, we just got one, I'm trying to figure out how to put it in, and I haven't done it yet, and I'm just wondering, how did you do yours? And so then he started talking to me, he's telling me all about it, and then eventually he said, "Hey, why don't you just come and have a look?" And so we engaged in the most male behavior of all time. We walked into his house, he gave me a beer, and we stood around commenting on his appliances. And it was amazing. He invited me into his home. We ended up chatting for a long time about all sorts of things. And then eventually he actually accepted an invitation to come over to our house for dinner, and they did. And it was one of those things that took me actually seeing the opportunity to accept his hospitality, to ask for something, to ask to be a person who is needy, that needs to receive hospitality in order to be missional. And I think this is true of many in our culture. They are wary of Christians, and we can come across sometimes as too eager and creepy. That might just be me, but we're just a little bit too eager, and so they are a little bit distant from us. And sometimes asking for help, asking for their hospitality can actually be an amazing and beautiful way in. Okay, lastly, that practicing hospitality as mission in the Bible always includes loving the vulnerable and marginalized. It's not just for those that we like and those who are like us. Remember that word xeno, it's from those who are different than us. And specifically, it includes those who are, like I said, marginalized and vulnerable. That Angus Reid survey that I talked about, it said the people who are disproportionately more lonely due to the pandemic are people who I would call marginalized. It's people who make less money. It's people who are older. And I'm quoting now, it's visible minorities, Indigenous Canadians, those with mobility challenges, and LGBTQ2 individuals. They're all noticeably more likely to deal with social isolation and loneliness than the general population average. And so this is an opportunity for us to practice radical hospitality with the marginalized and the vulnerable that God has put in our lives and in our neighborhood. Christine Pohl writes this: our hospitality with neighbors, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable, is a powerful statement to the world about who's interesting, who's valuable, and who's important to us, and who's interesting, who is valuable, and who's important to God. So practically, again, this is a bizarre time to be talking about this, but I love the way that Romans 12 translates the verse that we were looking at. It says, be inventive in hospitality. And I think what a great challenge to us as we practice missional hospitality right now. And so maybe it's something as simple as, messaging a friend. You could just text message them or call them, this crazy thing that your phone can also be used to make phone calls. And you could even just say, hey, I'm trying these new spiritual practices. My pastor's making me do it. He's an absolute slave driver. I'm just wondering if there's, anything I can pray for you. I found that so many more people are open to prayer and these deeper conversations during the pandemic. And so maybe a great opportunity to be missional, to extend the filial love of God to others. Maybe you can join an online community. There's many of these floating around. My wife we moved into Strathcona. She just joined this community where people are giving away free stuff on Facebook in our neighborhood. And so we've received and given away a bunch of things, and it's great. We get to meet all sorts of different people and be engaged in our neighborhood, all in a contactless manner. And so, maybe there's book clubs that you can join or other things that you can join. Just join an online community, a place where you can be missional and meet people. You can show the hospitality to marginalized by volunteering with Inner Hope. Become a neighbor to some inner city youth who could really use a friend. And then lastly, this might fall into the category of radical hospitality, but consider fostering or adopting. One of the most beautiful things in our community, and things I just feel so privileged to be a part of in the last few years, is that we've had over 11 kids adopted in this community. And I just think that this is one of those amazing times. This is one of those times where maybe we can't go out and do mission in the same way, but maybe you can sit down with your spouse and ask them, are we open to, is God calling us to fostering or adopting? Or even if you're a single person, is God calling me to foster or adopt? And we've been so privileged to be part of that. And you're going to hear a few stories about that in the interview. And we as a church would love to help if God is calling you to that. But what a beautiful way to express this radical generosity and love of God through fostering and adopting. I'm more and more convinced that in our day and in our city, the gospel does not move at the speed of information. People, it's not like they need more information about God. It moves at the speed of relationship. It moves at the speed of friendship, and it moves at the speed of hospitality. That people need to know and trust a Christian before they be interested in looking more at the life of Jesus. And for our coworkers, for the people around us, for our friends and our neighbors, for our family members who live in the city who don't know Jesus, if we long for them to come to Jesus, to know him like we do, to experience this agape love of Jesus, the affection and love of being part of his family, then we need to learn to pursue passionately and currently hospitality, to extend the love of Jesus into our city and into our communities in a way that people can learn to be friends with us, and then hopefully to be friends with Jesus. In her book, in the end here, I just want to say, in her book, in the Gospel Comes with a House Key, author Rosaria Butterfield writes this. She says, radically means changed from the root. That's where the word comes from. That if someone wants to be radical, it can't just be something that we do once in a while, but we actually have to be changed from the bottom up. And I think that's true about hospitality too. We don't want to just be people who dabble in hospitality. We want to be people who are hospitable from the bottom up, from the roots all the way to the fruit. So how do we become people that are hospitable? How do we become a hospitable community? I think the key for us is to receive the radical hospitality of God, to see it and to receive it. The story of the Bible says that we are all estranged from God, that we come as tired and as weary and as hungry guests in search of a meal. And God is out there extending this invitation to us. I think of the picture in Luke 15 where the Father is just waiting for his Son to return home to invite him into the feast. And this is like God for us, that he sees us and he goes out of his way to invite us into the feast, into the table, into this deep intimacy with him and with one another. And God is such a great host that he not only gives of himself, that he's not only out there extending the invitation, he doesn't just give of his stuff, but he actually gives himself. And in Christ, as we celebrate in Christmas that he has come, that this is God come here to extend the invitation to us, and he gives of his very life. It says that his body and his blood are actually the food that create the space at this table for us to be reunited with God. And for those of us who don't follow Jesus yet, we can receive this offer of forgiveness of sins, an offer of life and nourishment from Jesus. That's the first step to coming to his table, to see his invitation and to accept this offer from Jesus, to hear him say to you, your sins are no more, to join his family, to learn his way of life and become a person of cosmic hospitality. And for those of us who do follow of Jesus, the table, the communion table, is a place that we can come together where we remember the story of God. This is what the Israelites did when they practiced Passover, that they remember that they were slaves in Egypt, but God freed them, that it's a place where we do that too. We experience the invitation, the salvation, and the radical hospitality of God, that we are now freed people. We are no longer slaves to sin as we often sing. And we come as people to the table to be renewed and replenished in the work that we have to do, to extend this hospitality to the world. And we take the gospel, as we take the elements into our lives, that we take the gospel story into our lives, that we make it our own. And we get the energy to extend that story to the world. And at the table, we all come together to be with Jesus, to be with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And we raise a glass, but we also raise our eyes past the din of whatever's happening in our life, past COVID restrictions and the craziness of 2020. And we lift our eyes, we're invited to lift our eyes to see with Jesus a future, that the great final feast that he's calling us to be part of together, where Jesus will dine with us and we will work together to see everything made new. And that is the great hope. And I encourage you, we haven't been able to take communion together in a while because of the restrictions. But if you're at home, maybe that's something you want to just do with each other or by yourself. So take some time to remember that feast and to physically put it into practice. That's part of what we do as we take communion together. Take some wine or juice, take some bread or crackers, and just take a moment to remember and dine with Jesus. In closing, Peter Leithart says this: "The Lord's Supper is the world in miniature. It has cosmic significance. Within it, we find clues to the meaning of all creation and all history, to the nature of God and the nature of man, to the mystery of the world, which is Christ." He closes with this: "Though the table stands at the center, its effects stretch out to the four corners of the earth." This is my prayer as we take communion together, as we come around the table of Jesus together, as we eat and drink with him and with one another, that the effects of this, that the radical hospitality that we receive, would actually extend to the corners of our neighborhoods, of our city, and to the world. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me and joining all of us as we talk about hospitality. And you guys are all people that I have the privilege to get to know, but also to experience and observe hospitality in your lives in different ways. So I'm really excited to hear from you and just hear how God has led you to express hospitality uniquely in your life and in your families, and also just how he's led you there and what he's doing. So thanks so much for joining us and making time. I wanted to start with you, Carrie. I think one of the things I really appreciate about you, and I know many of the others in our community have experienced, is your hospitality, your heart for hospitality, but also just being able to be in your home. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was reflecting on the times I've been in your home, one of the authors said that hospitality is neither entertainment or just being completely unprepared. And I think that one of the things I love about coming into your space, and I think other people have said too, is like you guys are just great at creating a space where you feel it's warm and you just feel welcomed. And that you guys are prepared for what's happening. That would be me. I'd be just unprepared. I might welcome people in. But it's just also a warm space. It's a very family space. And so thanks for being people like that in our community. And like I said, I know so many of other people in our community have experienced that. So, what motivates you to be hospitable in your life? What has led you down that path?
Thanks for that. I think for Andre and I both just a general affinity for it. So we both really like it. But also just we see it as a command and calling of us as Christians as well. The command to love your neighbor. I feel like hospitality is literally an extension of that. That's how you literally love your neighbor. And I feel like those two things.
Yeah, thanks. Are there any people, I think you enjoy it, so it's part of your personality. Are there any people that kind of modeled that for you in your life, or examples that helped you to pave the way to know what it looks like to live a life of hospitality?
Yeah. When I was thinking about this, I thought about, and you're referencing it too, John, but a few years ago, I listened to the book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield. And I was just, I would just do these stroller walks with Jude while Luke was at preschool, just listening to this book, which really is written as a fascinating story of this one woman and her conversion to Christianity, essentially through hospitality and through Christians having her over for meals just repeatedly. And so just really inspired, I guess, through both, her story and how she came to faith, but then also the ways she lives that out now, and the ways that she blesses and loves those around her through hospitality. So I think, Andre and I would just highly recommend that book, for sure. The Gospel Comes with a House Key. But also I would say just like, I learned so much through so many people at Reality. Like, I feel like our community group has been, just time and time again, like a huge example to me what hospitality looks like. And there, like, we have people in our group who are literally willing to house people who need a place to live, who don't maybe have one temporarily. We have people in our community group who are so generous with their finances or with their time, or helping other people move, or making meals, or doing laundry. And I feel like, I just feel like those people that we regularly interact with from Reality are already a huge example to me, and continuously challenge me to think through ways that I can continue to be hospitable to others.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I think I read the book, The Gospel Comes with the House Key, this week, and it was very challenging to me. Also, fun fact, her middle name is Champagne. Did you know that?
I did, yeah.
Sarah Butterfield's middle name, Champagne, which is also, I mean, hosting is probably right in her blood. It's in her name. So, but I like the book as well. It's quite challenging. I think one of the things that stops some of us from hosting is that we have, young kids, and there's all sorts of different dynamics there that can be maybe all the way from things that stop us to just excuses to being hospitable and hosting people. So any tips or thoughts on being hospitable with a young family?
Yeah, I think that the first one that I thought of was just to have the freedom to let go, maybe, of things that we can associate with hospitality but don't really belong with hospitality. So letting go of things like needing to have your house perfectly in order, or even needing to serve quality food. Like, hospitality can be done with hot dogs, I think we can put a lot of things on hospitality that actually become barriers to practicing it, because we have to have all our ducks in a row in order to invite people into our home. Our kids, maybe need to be like dressed a certain way or on a certain behavior, or you have to have the right, table setting or whatever it is for you. I think that can stop us from then extending ourselves out. And so maybe that's the first tip I would say is, I think, just let go of what isn't actually hospitality, so that you can practice what is true hospitality. Another thing I thought of was like planning ahead, and I think you kind of touched on it already, but just, I think what helps me is things like meal planning, or planning bigger meals too, planning a little bit extra if I'm not sure, like that way we have extra food to offer if some people do end up joining us last minute. Having a deep freeze has been really helpful, so we can, if we have leftovers, just putting that aside in the freezer so we do have something on hand later on. I think about seasons when we've had newborns in our home, and it's so stressful just cooking for our own family, let alone others. So I was thinking, prepping meals, and the night before, when you have time, if you can prep something that can just be heated up the next day, if you're going to have a gathering the next day, or just planning ahead, I think, as much as you can. If you're doing baking, just bake an extra batch and freeze it, even if you're not sure when you're going to use it. That kind of thing can be just really helpful, and maybe take some of the pressure off too. If you're all of a sudden, if there's a need, it's really helpful to just have something in your back pocket. Somebody lost a loved one, and you have a meal that you can just give right off the bat. It's really nice. Other things I was thinking was using the space that you have. So in this season, we are really fortunate to have kind of a larger space for Vancouver, but you don't really need to have a big space to practice hospitality. Just be creative with the space that you have. You don't need to have a meal at the table. You can have a meal on using your coffee tables or your kids' tables or couches or even on the floor. You can be creative that way as well. Another thing I was thinking of is sometimes, one thing I was thinking about was letting your kids participate as well. So we can think of our kids as a burden and, getting in the way of practicing hospitality. But I think just inviting your kids in as well to that has been, really awesome. Like, it's been so cool to see our kids interact with different people that come into our home, and just having, different people read books to our kids, or having our kids just be so excited to show different strangers or friends their toys or what they're up to. I know it means a lot to our kids, and I also see it impacting positively the people who come into our home. So, but on the flip side of that as well, I think it's also okay. Andre and I have also had seasons where it has felt like a lot to have people in our home at meal times. And so sometimes I think it is okay to just say, hey, come over for dessert after the kids are in bed. And that's still totally cool. And practicing hospitality. And the last thing is just praying, praying for people who come to your table, who just come into your home, that it would be, just a place of peace and rest, and a time of fellowship where people who come in can genuinely feel safe and loved and heard and definitely listened to. So, I don't know if there's anything else to add or.
Oh, that's great. And it's such a practical list. I think for many of us who, we're just not experienced, or it doesn't come naturally to us, it does take down the breakdown of those things, even like you're saying, just, having a deep freeze, if we have space for that, then that's just a practical thing that, I would never think of, but is so helpful. I'm reminded of the quote from Rosario Butterfield that says, hospitality, this radical hospitality, takes 50% prayer, which you referenced, 40% organization, which you referenced, the planning ahead, and then just 10%, she calls it chutzpah, just like making it happen. And I've experienced that at your house, and I think it's a great summary too of all the things you're talking about. There's like some really practical and planning things. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to ask you, turn now to Ali, and just talk a little bit about hospitality and evangelism. One of the things I appreciate as I, offer prayer, and as you guys have been friends, Ali, you and Carson have been friends with us, is that oftentimes you'll ask for prayer for people around you. And I know the people that you do art with are people that are just always on the top of your mind to pray for and to care about. And so I've really admired your desire to get to share the love of Jesus with them in different ways. And I know that that's transitioned in your life, how you can do that, and learning how to do that with people in the art scene in Vancouver. So, how did you develop a heart for evangelism? Where did that start with you? And again, like, some of us don't have that. So, where did you learn it, and how did it develop in your life?
Yeah. Thanks, John. I would say my heart for evangelism grew from a young age. Like, it was modeled to me for my whole life with my relationship with my parents and the way that they orchestrated our home growing up. There was sort of a constant open door policy to many, many people of different walks of life and of different journeys. And there was constant emphasis on conversations about Jesus and sharing about our faith, and with the motivation that lives are changed. And so to continually be exposed to that from a young age, I recognized how that instilled in me my own faith, like my own belief in Jesus, in seeing lives changed. And so, I would definitely say my heart was ignited in my upbringing, my home growing up. I think another thing for me then, as I've continued on in like my own individual Bible study, is sort of focusing on the life of Jesus and really paying attention to the ways that he was spending his time. And I just have always been captivated by that, and by his choice to spend time with those who someone might least expect. And to me, that really became a motivator to to engage people of different backgrounds or of different pasts, and with the motivation to build relationship and to build genuine friendship, and then along the way to share my faith, and with the hope to ultimately show them the love of Jesus.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think of the words of Paul in Philippians, where he just encourages people to imitate him, and sometimes as a father, he even says in another passage. And I just think of it, it's awesome to see how the faith of your parents has influenced you and had that in your life. And one of the things I do appreciate you, I think of where some people might find fear in others' differences, you see opportunity and openness and the hand of God at work. So what is God teaching you, recently in evangelism, especially as we talk about, in mission and hospitality? What are some things you're learning?
Yeah. I'd say, like merging my passions and my love for Jesus. And so deciding to study art and engage in the art community has been something that I've been continually growing, questioning, and learning how God wants me to use my involvement there, like my place there, for his glory. And so that has been something that has been continually challenging and remains that to be so. But I think for me, art, then I recognize art as sort of the door that opens up the space for conversation, and the space to share commonality, and to and art in particular. Like, artists are so passionate, and they have so many ideas and hopes, and also sorrows and struggles, and so within that there's just like so much to talk about. And so I find that like I'm a part of an artist studio here in East Van, and like I just find so much of my time is spent listening, like to just be a listening ear. And so I'm learning a lot about how listening is a really important part of personal evangelism, like to really focus on like being an empathetic, constant ear for someone to share. And I think what I've learned with my art friends in particular is that seems to be something that is really helpful for them, and it just further opens doors to sharing about their life and my life. And I think then as we grow in friendship, we are able to I'm able to share more about the hope that I have and the reasons for the choices that I make. And so I'd say that's a big thing that I'm learning about merging like our passion or our gifting with evangelism. So that's what I would say about that. And then further, really practically, like I appreciated what Carrie said, like about the deep freeze, and so I would also say, like, for me, bringing a meal like to the studio or something like that, or like having friends into my home for like a meal has just been huge, especially for like artists who sometimes like aren't having that, like if they aren't having that kind of experience maybe. And so I found that has been a really important part of evangelism, to host and to share a meal, and to listen, like to further open that door to a relationship. And then, yeah, I think in that it enables me to really be prayerful about who God is placing in my life and whose life I'm being placed in, and to really be open to how conversations ebb and flow, and how the Lord, like what the Lord wants in this moment, in this conversation, in this interaction with this person right here and now. So like presence also is something that I'm learning. Yeah, and then I'd say too, like patience and courage is something that, like, as relationships become routine, or like relationships like have become span over years, it can become even harder sometimes to really step back into questions about faith, and questions about what we're ultimately seeking after. So I think too, like courage has been a big theme that I've been thinking about lately. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I think there's lots of amazing nuggets there. And I mean, I totally get that tension of walking, like you said, in patience, and waiting on the Holy Spirit, and being patient, but then also having those moments where you feel like you want to say something, or God's leading you to say something, and sometimes so hard to tell between the two. But I appreciated too what you said about, like, listening is one of the most, I think, maybe radically incarnational and hospitable things we can do to people, and being present with them, paying attention to them, is one of those really, really important, amazing things. I appreciated what you said in when we were prepping the interview. You had mentioned a gluten-free, I forget what it was, lactose-free, gluten-free, meat-free lasagna.
Like everything free, yeah. Lasagna.
I was wondering is that just nothing? Is that eating air? I think that's everything in the lasagna.
Well,
but
it's a big hit.
Okay.
I'm asked to make it quite often. So
yeah,
just like veggies.
I'm intrigued. But I think, like, is there a better missional meal in Vancouver? I really probably couldn't imagine one.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And ironically, we just moved and got rid of our deep freeze, so maybe I'm feeling the conviction of everybody mentioning. If Rudy and Vicky, if you mention a deep freeze, I'm going to go out and buy one tonight. But thanks, Allie. Rudy and Vicky, I want to transition to you guys now. And again, we've experienced hospitality at your home, and it's been a great time for us and our family. And again, just the warmth and invitation, and spending time with you guys. But one of the things I'd love for you to talk a little bit about is your experience, maybe in hospitality, but also in fostering. Again, as we were just talking before, you said, I think we've fostered 13 kids over the years, and even just knowing, like, that there's so many that I'm sure each of them is precious and special, and we could go through what their actual names are, but that you've just done that so much in the life of your family that the count is too high to just have off the top of your head. So, and maybe something that a lot of people in our community don't know about you. So you just tell us a little bit about that, and what led you down that path to foster those kids. Are there any people or examples or biblical passages that led you to open your home in that way?
I would say opening our home to other people has been something that's been part of who we are since we've been married. We actually, you mentioned a biblical passage that was actually sort of the theme for our wedding. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord was the verse we had plastered on the wall at our wedding reception. And
I'm picturing you with an afro. Is that true?
No.
Okay. Well, that's just in my head. Okay,
I
sorry.
have slightly more hair. That's
okay.
All.
Continue.
But yeah, so it's from the very first time we ever looked at getting a house. We realtor was trying to convince us to get a townhouse, and we said, no, we want to have people over, we want more room. And how about this place? We said, no, there's got to be parking for visitors. So that's kind of always been important for us to be able to have space so that people could be there. And when we built this house about almost 30 years ago now, the plan was to have a house that was roomy enough for the family, but still had space for guests to be over. And we actually designed it so that my dad could live with us. And as it turns out, God had other plans and took him home before he could ever move in. But we built a whole suite downstairs. So basically, we had the space and felt like we could use it. And then we started hearing about needs. Vicky heard in the school.
I was a substitute teacher, and saw kids in the deaf school that were being placed in homes where nobody could sign, and thought that was wrong and that we should do something about that, because we had room and we had the ability to communicate with kids and we had children and we needed to do something. So we had a bit of a fight with the way things are in the foster system, which was by region, not by need. So you were supposed to, if you live in Burnaby, you're supposed to have Burnaby kids, in Vancouver, your neighborhood kids. But for us, we're in the neighborhood of the deaf school, and kids were going to that school from Surrey, Langley, everywhere. And we just made the case that they should be here and walk to school 2 blocks. And we, in the process, had several hearing kids that needed a place. And so things have been all kinds of different ways with different kids. Some stayed 1 night, some stayed 2 months, some stayed 2 years. And the longest one was a deaf child who had been shuttled around a lot. And she stayed for like 12 years, 12 or more. So anyway, that's our we had friends at Willingdon Church who became foster parents at the same time we did. We didn't know each other were doing that. And so that was good to have other people that were kind of doing something kind of like me too. But it's been good and hard, and the kids they needed stability, but they didn't like being uprooted. And
it's a very thankless job. Okay, if we're doing a promo for being foster parents, it's not something that is going to get you a lot of pats on the back. Generally, the kids don't want to be here. They'd much rather be home with their parents. And people are very cynical. Oh, you're in it for the money. They can't pay you enough to do some of the stuff that we had to deal with. But it is, I mean, I just think, in a sense, it kind of reminds me a little bit about, Jesus came and he was persecuted. I mean, yeah, we had police in our house saying, this kid has said you did this and you did that. No, that's not true. And so you got to deal with that kind of stuff too. So anyway, it's not always the most thankful. I mean, it can be a very thankless job, put it that way. On the other hand, the difference you can see in kids' lives is amazing. Just one quick example is of a child that we got to know who had, basically, he was 3 years old and he had virtually no language. No one had ever thought that it was important that he learn sign language, so he could hardly communicate. He could make a few gestures that he needed to eat or he needed to pee. That was about all he could say. And within about less than a month of living with us, all of a sudden he had what I called his Helen Keller moment, where the lights sort of flipped on and he realized, oh, all these things you're doing with your hands all the time mean something. Oh, you mean, oh, that's got a name? And he started running around telling him, what's that called? What's that called? What's that called? And he just started learning. And by the end of his first year of preschool, the preschool teacher said that he was the top kid in the class. He could communicate better than anybody in class. So, I mean, when you hear, when you experience that, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if I remember correctly, were you guys part of changing like almost a law that not only kids that came into your home, but now kids, deaf kids that are in the foster system now can,
We
need to be
when we
placed with
had
a
when
family?
we had our 10-year anniversary, they had a big program for everyone who's been foster parents for 10 years, and we got to meet the I guess it wasn't the minister, the deputy minister for children and families, whatever they called it at the time. And he read my name tag and read Dickies and said, "Oh, you're those Ungers." Oh, so the big shots in Victoria knew who we were because we said the system is wrong. You need to focus on the needs of the children, not on where the caregivers live. It doesn't matter where they live. You got to find people that can actually meet the needs of the kids. So, yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, a freezer story too. We're now thinking about moving out of this house and moving to a smaller space. We're having a really hard time with that because we still want to have people over.
Mm.
COVID days will disappear, hopefully, and we've looked at one house. There's no room for a freezer. That was Rudy's big thing. Where would you put the freezers? So anyway, that's just another little aside there.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, you're convicting me. My grandma was Mennonite and had two freezers even when she lived in a tiny apartment. It was just part of her life. Well, let me just ask the question again to all of you guys. Are there any last words, anything that comes to your mind that you would want to share with our community about hospitality?
Just echo what Carrie said about being prepared. You can be prepared, but you don't have to be perfect, and don't expect that people are coming to see your shiny toilet or beautiful matched dishes. But the idea is just to have them over. And I have memories of different churches when we were in California inviting people, you never forget, even just a one-time meeting with people, when you're kind of the new kid on the block, especially. It means a lot, even if you just see different people different times and you don't have an ongoing relationship with them. There's a sporadic hospitality that really matters too.
Yeah, it's good. I remember we had people over in our house. We can struggle with that that it needs to be perfect, and they came and at the end they said, "Oh, that's just neat. You guys, our son has never ate at a dinner table before." You're like, "Oh, okay. Well, we're at a different level. It's not about bringing out the Wedgwood china. It's about just providing a space."
The other thing that I was thinking of, just connecting to what Ali was saying about, learning from her parents. I think I'm very proud of our kids who are now serving the Lord at each of their churches and are hospitable and are hosting community groups in their homes and so on. And I think, our kids, as much as they complained at the time about these foster kids who are coming in and breaking our toys and whatever all, I think it had an impact on them. And I think, hospitality, having people in the house, whether the kids actually say they enjoy it or not, they're learning. And I want to encourage everybody to think about, the example you're setting for your kids as they're growing up and seeing what mom and dad are doing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think going along with what you said, Rudy, like the fact that these things affect the people that we're reaching out to, but then also those who are witnessing it. So like kids in a home, like to watch the conversations and the hosting happen. Carrie, you mentioned it too, like engaging your kids in hosting. It does so much for them as well. So it's such an incredible and a formative experience for their spiritual formation in life. And so, I think it's just, I'm so grateful for it as well. And I totally echo, Rudy, what you're saying. Like in the moment, you don't always understand it, particularly when you're a kid, like, why are we doing this? But these routines and sort of like the liturgy of always keeping an empty space at the table, it has a profound lifelong impact.
Good. Well, I'm sure we could talk all night, but want to make sure we before the rat stops running in the thing to keep your internet going there, Rudy and Vicky, we need to make sure we wrap it up. So Carrie, do you mind just praying for us and for our church as we move into a time of response?
For sure. Yeah, Lord, just we come to you and we thank you for this time. Thank you for the gift of one another, just that we have a mandate from you to love one another, and that we get to do that in so many different ways, that we get to use our own creativity and gifts to love other people in our lives, Lord Jesus. And I just pray that you would equip us to do so, that you would strengthen us, that you would help us fight our own sinful tendencies and our flesh, in the areas that we don't want to think about others, in the areas where we don't want to give of our time or of our space or of our things to other people. Lord, would you purge that from us, Lord, and would you humble us? Would you make us just willing servants to be hospitable to those around us, and would we do so with great joy? Would you help us in our love for one another, and in reflecting who you are to others through meals, through time shared together, through just the messiness of life. Would people be blessed, and would people come to know you? Would people be drawn to you? Would people see you through the ways that we show hospitality to others? Would you equip us? Would you give us creativity even in these times where we may think hospitality can't happen? Lord, would you just give us creativity and wisdom as to how to still practice hospitality, how to still love one another during this time. So, God, we thank you, and we pray this in your name. Amen.
Look on your handiwork and build love our communities, our neighbors, our family, the way that Jesus does, and just being hospitable and generous. So let's sing this. Help me, Holy Ghost. I need you more than anything. All my best ideas are yours. What am I but what you make of me? Let's sing that again. Help me, Holy Ghost. I need you more than anything. All my best ideas are yours. What am I but what you make of me? So help me, God. Breathe on my weakness, for all I want is to be like Jesus. And I don't have much, but what I have is yours to use. So make my whole life your upper room. Help me, Holy Ghost. I need you more than I can say. May your thoughts become my own, till the Father's will be done in me. So help me, God. Breathe on my weakness, for all I want is to be like Jesus. And I don't have much, but what I have is yours to use. So make my whole life your upper room. Sing that one more time. So help me, God. So help me, God. Breathe on my weakness, for all I want is to be like Jesus. And I don't have much, but what I have is yours to use. So make my whole life your upper room. Jesus, we're so thankful for the ways that you have extended your grace to us, for the ways that you use us despite all of our fickleness and our feebleness, and just all the ways that we we lack what it takes to be your disciples. But thank you that you give us your Spirit, and that you call us to be disciplers and disciple making, and in all the ways, in all the small ways that you do. So God, would you just pour your Spirit out on us this week, and would you use us as your hands and feet to move in powerful ways, and people would see the way that you love them in the way that we are able to love each other. We pray this all in the strong name of Jesus. Amen. So reality, as you go out, we do just want to pray that over you, that we would be so rooted and established in love, and would just know the love of Christ that gives us a new identity, and how that allows us to love our neighbors and our family and our friends well, even in a pandemic. So would you go in peace, reality?